All right, today I want to disabuse you of the idea that there's a housing shortage due to supply chain issues and any of that other bullshit. What is happening right now is that investors have bought all the real estate. Here you'll see 20 million homes gone to investors. This other graphic here will show that 25% of homes in this region owned by investors. And so that reminds you that the houses are being sold. I have another one here showing you how many times they've been sold. Some of these houses have been sold 2 or 3 times in the past year, past 2 years, or whatever else, which is that
Housing is selling.
a lot of cash buyers
But you ain't got no fucking neighbors.
because nobody moved into the house. Graphic I was showing there, the house sold twice in a couple of weeks, which means nobody moved in there. And then it's been up for rent. And I see dozens upon dozens of houses in that same situation. Sold, 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 sold. So there is no supply shortage. There's no uh, housing demand. There's no anything. There's just good old fashioned corruption and price gouging. And any realtor, anybody involved in real estate is lying to you to tell you anything else is involved in why the prices are through the roof. There's these issues, but they are playing such a minor role that the real estate market currently is closer to De Beers and diamonds. Diamonds are basically plentiful and worthless, except that they collect them all up and store them. As you can see in the movie, like Blood Diamond, that drives it up. And then the marketing tells you if somebody loves you, they'll spend too much salary. When if they love you, they'll put that money up and do something productive in your lives. Save it for a rainy day, find y'all a freaking place to live, other stuff like that. But this is what's happening. So they're buying up all the real estate, and then that is just churning the real estate market. There's no activity, it's churning. And so if you can see that they buy the house for say 240,000 in December, and then another company or investor turns around in January and buys it for another 50,000. And then when you personally are out looking for a house for sale, all of a sudden this $270,000 market community is now a $370,000 market community. And that's because of the supply. Yeah, it's because of the supply. Yeah. That all the real estate in the area is being bought up by investors. Yeah, they bought up the supply and restricted what's left for actual families and individuals to purchase. That's why everybody's a cash buyer all of a sudden. Ain't that many freaking cash buyers. You know any cash buyers? Are you a cash buyer? No. So you know who the cash buyers are. National landlords, national investors, independent investors. That's all it is. That's why there's so much driving in the price. That's why there's going to be a crash because they're doing it as monopoly money. They're doing it because to them it's just another stock market cryptocurrency game for them. It's asset backed commercial paper all over again. It's 2008 all over again for them. And when that money does not come back to them that they're expecting, just like these high rents that they were thinking that they did no market research of whether people would afford it, could afford it, or would pay it. And so I'm watching them drop the prices of the rents by 20, 30% before they can get the house rented. And they had plans for all of this money they were going to get. They're not going to be able to sell the houses for the prices because it's out of the market. Wages have not kept up remotely with any of that. And so there's no way for them to recoup their money, and they will start to liquidate 20 million homes. When you start to liquidate 20 million homes that were bought recently because they thought they were going to flip them and spend all this money renovating them and thought they were going to create a whole country of renters at expensive and exorbitant rents, People can't pay them. They're just going out on the street, consolidating, living with families, staying put, just to ride out the storm, just to ride out all the time that they can say, oh, supply chain issues where people
Going like, how much longer do you think the supply chain issues are going to go?
on. Oh, we expect, no, ain't no reason for them to keep going on. You killed the pandemic. Everybody's back to fucking work. They're out there building houses. You go through any new community, there's workers out there building them. So the prices can't stay up there. The rents they're not getting. So that's a bunch of profits that they thought were going to be coming in the door, not coming in the door. And they will start to liquidate. That's what companies do. And if you buy a house in that situation, in this pump and dump, like they do with stocks, like they did to destroy Sears and Toys R Us, they drove down the value of the stock, liquidated the assets or whatever else. And those people, those Redditors, flipped it around on them and cost all those hedge funds all that money with like GameStop. That's a very similar situation right now. Hedge funds come in and break down companies and sell off the pieces and drive the stock down by shorting the stock. In this situation, they're all buying it and churning it and driving it up, just like they do stocks, cryptocurrency, whatever it is, whatever's in vogue at the moment. And if you're a sucker and you get in at the height before that plummet, you're going to lose everything. Even if you have to rent right now, you're going to be paying exorbitant rent to what the value is. But at least as a renter, your lease will end long before someone's mortgage will end. So maybe you are trapped for a year or two paying something and watch the rents go down exponentially here over the next year or so. But at least you're just setting your watch to the end of the lease, and you can jump back in whatever town or city, or hopefully in your situation, your town or city is back to normal. And you're finding places of comparable size for 20, 30, 40% less than what you got trapped into paying. If you bought it for extra $100,000, $200,000 over what it was actually originally should have been worth, what the region can absorb, what people can pay, when it's not just one investor selling it to another investor at a higher price and driving up the prices in the area. There's no reason that prices have went up 20, 30, 40% in any area of the country. There's not that much influx. There's not that much supply chain. Otherwise, hell, the investors would have a hard time finding places. But they're not, because they're buying dozens and dozens and dozens of properties at a time. If you have a place, it's even hard to sell it at these higher rates because you'd have to go buy a place at these higher rates. So people are sitting on their regular homes, not hardly renting them out, not hardly selling them until this madness is over. And it's going to be over. So don't let anybody tell you there's not going to be a crash. Don't let anyone tell you it's because of supply chains and the demand and remote workers and all this other bullshit. It is greed and price gouging. The greed is they expected to buy these houses, put down some of these cheap ass paper floors and sell them at a profit. Buy these houses, put in these paper floors, that look wood, and rent them at exorbitant prices. But people are going to look around and say, why is there still supply chain issues? Why isn't construction being done? Because the only way for construction not to be done this spring, this summer, is for them to just deliberately not to build the new houses. Just for the companies just to slow it down on purpose. And again, that's a form of manipulating the markets. Build faster, hire more people, catch up. And other than that, you need state, federal, local governments to regulate the purchases of these communities. Otherwise, your city or town could go bankrupt as they begin to liquidate, and that affects that nobody's around to really own these houses. Property taxes plummet. It just creates a big mess as they walk away and leave. You see here 25% of the houses vacant, selling for pennies on a dollar. Just completely disrupt everything in your city. And while the cities be like, Well, the states have already passed laws. We can't limit rent. You can't limit rent. You can't limit rent. Why couldn't?
Who?
First of all, went out and got these laws passed in the first place, state after state, that you can't regulate rent. Who had the foresight? What type of people put money in the pockets of the politicians and said there can't be any limits on the price of rent? What do you mean? Why is that a thing? Who went out and did that? I'm like, well, I don't think there should be a cap. Yes, because you can't be trusted to do the right thing. This is why things like socialism and communism catch on with the public. Because eventually people feel like, yeah, I don't see what's so wrong about it being fair. I don't see what's so right and virtuous and awesome about so many people having so much and then people, hardworking people being thrown out on the street, or the richest country having such a large homeless population. I don't see the virtue in that. I don't see what's so awesome about that. I don't see what's wrong with guaranteeing that every family could live with dignity and at least have a roof over their head and put some food in their children's belly every day. That's the appeal. If capitalism has to work, it has to work for everybody. And it's times like these that make people kind of rub their chin and say,
Are there other fucking options besides
greed and hurting people? Are there other options? Well, that would be socialism. Fine, whatever the fuck it's called, where we don't have endless amounts of homelessness and people being thrown out on the street and families starving. Whatever you want to call it, I would rather sign up for that. That's where that comes from. Can we do something a little bit more fair and equitable rather than just letting greed run wild? When you go to rent, there's all these rules and regulations and application fees and multiple times, and it is way more strict to rent than it is to buy. They want you to have 3 times a mortgage, right? Can't really come up with 30% for a mortgage. But for rent, which is twice what a mortgage is, you need 3 times the rent. So the investment company that bought it needed $3,000. 3 times 1,000. They're charging $2,000 a month for rent, and so you need to prove that you have $6,000 a month. That's just a rudimentary example, but rents are typically double the mortgage. One's based on the 0.5% rule, the other one's based on the 1% rule. That's probably gone wildly out the window at this point. But just to keep everything simple, these companies have $1,100 mortgages, low interest rates on these houses, and are asking $2,200, $2,500, $2,600 a month. And then you need 3 times that. That's nowhere near what their mortgage is on that house. And that was not the requirement by banks and the federal law for them to be able to buy the house. Fannie Mae, nobody would have held anybody to that standard. And renting often is for while people are building up their credit, can't afford as much and things like that to get everything in order, the down payment and so on and so forth. But it is 100% stricter and a much higher threshold to rent than it is to buy. So the family was looking at that house as $250,000. They needed about, even numbers, $1,250 a month to be able to buy that house. Investors are in there churning it. So they needed $3,600 a month, and they say, hey, we have that. We could buy this house. They go in there and churn it and buy the house for $300,000. The investors do, and they had to prove $4,500, and they rent it for $2,500, and you need to prove $7,500 to rent it from one of these national landlords, or now local landlords, because everybody's in on the act. Local management companies, everybody's in on the act. That's capitalism. Decent people who could buy a home can't afford to rent. Decent people who have been renting for years and playing by the rules can't afford to live alone with their own family anymore. So yes, there's going to be a crash. There's no choice. People did not get any more money in their income as they're forced back to work, as they quickly shut down the moratorium, as they quickly shut down any income support and unemployment and everything else and withdrew all those higher amounts. People are back to regular wages that have not kept pace, even if it's a little higher than what they were doing. Even if they're making 12, now they're making 15. That's not going to allow them to have their rent double. So that's where we are. So that's why there's going to be a crash. I don't do clickbait. I make my videos for posterity. I'm in my freaking 50s. I met tens of thousands of people across this country, out of this country, and otherwise. And I maybe have 100 friends on Facebook. It's not true for my kids or whatever else. Somehow, these younger generations, anybody they've ever come in contact with is a friend. But someone may see this video. Someone may need to know. Or more importantly, like I did in 2006 and 2007, have proof that I said it in real time. Now, a year from now, when all this is going on and we're in the midst of the crash and whatever else, everybody will know, just like they did in 08 and 09 when they were figuring it out. But I told people in 2007, and I'm telling you in 2022, why it will happen. Just like I did in 2006 and 2007. Back in 2007 and 8, when they were saying it's black people that should have never owned homes and the liar loans, and you still to this day don't know anything about ABCP and what really happened. At this point, they're going to take demand softening and whatever else. That's why they're adjusting the interest rates. February was a soft month for consumer demand on buying homes. And it's going to stay soft because people are just going to bide their time and stay where they're at. They don't have no choice. They don't have a bunch of money. Some of them can't rent at the higher rates. They definitely can't buy at the higher prices. They're not willing to take a half of the house that they would have been able to get. And the way it's going now, the interest rates will be higher. And with higher interest rates, they've already canceled your opportunity to buy when interest rates were low because they bought all the inventory during the pandemic. Cold-hearted greed, where millions of families could have got in and secured their home for the future at the lower interest rates because it would have brought nicer homes into their price range. Now that the interest rates are going back up
due to their churning and burning
of the real estate market, now you still won't be able to afford that house because the interest rates will cancel out your income. So either the price cancels out your income or the interest rates. You're never going to get what you deserve. It's never going to be fair for you. And any intervention on your behalf is socialism. But letting these private entities social engineer generations of Americans and hardworking people's lives, providing incentives, providing backing, providing supports, it's not socialism somehow. Corporate welfare is not welfare. Anything that they do for the rich and wealthy is not socialism. Helping you all of a sudden becomes socialism. So that's where we are. And that's the facts of it. And so I know I'll continue to see videos talking about, it's doom and gloom and this clickbait. I don't do clickbait. I don't spend the first 10 minutes of my video like everybody else on YouTube asking about damn clicking and subscribe. I don't care if you click or subscribe. I'm just putting this down for the record. Have a nice day.